Hey up guys, so today's movie I'm discussing on the channel is one of the most anticipated titles of 2024, a legacy sequel that's been 24 years in the making to a Best Picture winner no less. It is of course Ridley Scott's Gladiator 2. I was so nervous for this film because I love the original Gladiator movie. It's probably in my top 5 of Ridley Scott's filmography. I was skeptical. I was like, do we need a second Gladiator film? And honestly, most of these legacy sequels have just ended up disappointing me. But with Ridley Scott back in the director's chair and a cast that includes Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, and Denzel Washington. God, that's just fun to say. Mescal, Pascal, and Denzel. It's like poetry, innit? Give it a try. Mescal, Pascal, Denzel. I need someone to auto-tune the filth out of that, make it a bop. But yeah, the point that I was trying to make is the talent on board seemed promising, so I was cautiously excited for this film. Ridley Scott is like the definition of a hit or miss filmmaker for me because I love The Last Duel and The Martian, but wasn't a big fan of House of Gucci or Napoleon. But I wanted so bad for this film to be good. But what did I think of Gladiator 2? It gets a big, crowd-pleasing thumbs up from me. Phew, thank God. Gladiator 2 is set sometime around 16 to 20 years after the events of the first film. Rome is now being ruled by two brother emperors, Emperor Gator, played by Joseph Quinn, and Emperor Carcella, played by Fred Hechinger. They are delusional, hedonistic, petulant rulers who very much seem like the product of incest because they are very temperamental, they're quite cruel, have some psychotic tendencies, very much like Joffrey in Game of Thrones, a brat with far too much power. Chopping that, chopping that, chopping that, chopping that. I'm everywhere, I'm so Julius. But yeah, what could be worse than one Joffrey? Oh yeah. 2 of them. But yeah, Marcus Aurelius' dream of restoring Rome to a republican form of government lies in tatters right now because these 2 brothers rule with war and tyranny. You guys remember Lucius from the first film, Connie Nielsen's son? Well, he grew up to be Paul Mescal. Thighs and all. Thighs and all. We're just a bunch of crazy thighs and all. And even though he was next in line for the throne, he fled his birthright, became a soldier, found himself a wife. But after he loses a battle at Numidia to General Acaces, played by Pedro Pascal, he must compete in the Colosseum back in Rome, where he must face his past, but also survive and fight for the future of Rome. And that's all the plot you need to know. When it comes to the movies of 2024, one thing I certainly wasn't anticipating was that out of all the top dog, heavy hitter filmmakers releasing new work this year, like Luca Guadagnino, Pedro Almodovar, Steve McQueen, I did not expect that a legacy sequel from Ridley Scott would come out on top as my favorite of the bunch. Yeah, definitely didn't see that coming, because I ended up having a really good time with Gladiator 2. By all rights, Gladiator 2 had no business being this good, but when Ridley Scott is in his element and he hits it just right, his movies are so much fun and so satisfying. Like, this is easily one of Ridley Scott's best film in quite some time. Like, definitely his best since The Last Duel. If you guys haven't seen that film, highly recommend it. It's on Disney+. Yes, I'm gonna plug that film because it is so good and a little bit underrated. But would I put Gladiator 2 in my top 5 of Ridley Scott's filmography? Probably not, but I will leave my top 5 in the comment section down below. Be sure to check that out and do leave me your top 5 of Ridley Scott's work. Love hearing from you guys. And no, I don't think it's as good as the first film. I do have some issues with it, which I'll get into shortly, but I did think it was a solid sequel that I enjoyed far more than I thought I would. Like its predecessor, for a 2.5-hour movie, this was very entertaining, very well paced, lots of exciting set pieces, there were high emotional stakes, great characterization of all the new characters, and also very well performed. Anybody who knows me knows that I love Paul Mescal. It's great seeing the trajectory of his career the past few years, because he's gone from like small, often devastatingly sad indie films, I'm Looking at You, All of Us Strangers, and After Sun, to now being the leading man in a huge blockbuster franchise sequel. I'm very happy for him. I will say, I think his performance in Gladiator 2 is fine, but I do think that Paul Mescal's talents are better suited to the smaller, quieter movies and roles that he's known for, because Paul Mescal is a tremendous actor. I absolutely adore the socks off him, but I always find him most interesting when he's being quiet or introspective, like you can see the wheels turning, or how he's saying so much without saying anything at all. But because this is an action movie and he's the primary character, it's a very yelly, shouty type of role, and it's not really to Paul Mescal's strengths. It's not where I find him the most interesting when he's performing. But while I say he's perfectly good in this, I just think he's been so much better in other things. The smaller movies seems to be where his strengths lie. It's not as much of a command commanding performance as, say, Russell Crowe was in the first film. There's no denying that the man does look good in a skirt. Pedro Pascal brings a lot of depth to General Acasis. Like, we quickly learned that he is a more noble man than the two emperors that he serves. He's executing their orders, but he doesn't feel good about it, and he actually wants to depose these brothers for their crimes against the Senate and their people. Connie Nielsen is one of the few returning characters from the first film, and once again, she is the heart of this film. I don't want to say too much, but the emotional stakes in this film really do come from her character when she learns that her son Lucius has returned and must now compete in the Colosseum in these barbaric games. But the MVP of this film, besides Connie Nielsen's earlobes holding up those ridiculously heavy earrings, has to be Denzel Washington as Master of Gladiators Macronus. Now, this is how you do a campy performance in a Ridley Scott film, okay? I'm looking at you, Jared Leto, and Lady Gaga and House of Gucci. When I say that Denzel Washington is chewing the scenery, that's putting it lightly, okay? But it really does work for this film. Denzel Washington just owns every scene that is in with his charismatic and campy performance. Like Joaquin Phoenix in the first film, this is a supporting role where there was a lot for him to work with, okay? There was a lot of meat on the bone. And it's a performance that only gets more interesting as the story progresses. He is a Machiavellian presence in this film. Every time that he's on screen, you are keen to see what he's gonna do next. He's intelligent, he's cunning, he's funny, he's magnetic, he's a little bit bisexual, apparently, and he is easily the standout performance of the whole film. Now, like I said, I do have some issues with this film. The main issue that I had with this film is that it does suffer from sequelitis. Not only does it have blatant parallels to the first film, like with a very specific character dying at the start of the film, as well as like Lucius saying to the crowd, "Is this how Rome treats its heroes?" being like this film's version of, "Are you not entertained?" So yeah, at times it does feel like the story is leaning on the predecessor for support, but it's pretty much a given that if you're gonna make a sequel, then the audience has higher expectations, okay? And you've gotta try outdo what you did in the first one. Ridley must have felt that he had to top what we got with the first film, and the result is that the action set pieces in this film are a lot bigger, okay, there's a lot more spectacle, and the arenas are a lot more elaborate, to the point where they kind of feel in places like Hunger Games, Quarter Quell-esque. For example, there's this instance where Lucius is fighting these vicious monkeys in an arena as soldiers are like blowing darts into the arena and making the monkeys more violent, as well as another Poseidon-like set piece, which is like a naval battle between two ships in this massive pool that's inside a Colosseum. And I did check, okay, this is historically accurate. They did have these naval battles. They were known as Naumachia. But it was the decision to have like bloodthirsty sharks like populate the water beneath the ships, which I felt was like a step too far. I get that it adds some more suspense, and I know that, you know, embellishing is part of the creative process, but I don't know, it just kind of took me out of the gritty realism of it all, okay? It was all about the spectacle, and while the first film certainly did have moments of spectacle, like with the tigers and all, it was very much a case of less is more, whereas with this film, it really is a case of more is more. And with bigger set pieces, it often means more CGI, something that the first film didn't depend on as much. It's part of the reason why the film holds up so well, like nearly quarter of a century later, because so much of that film was done practically. There was CGI used in places, but if Ridley Scott could do it for real, he would. But there is a substantial amount of CGI used in this sequel, and I will say that some of it did look pretty good. I thought the rhinoceros sequence looked quite convincing, but the monkeys and some of the ship battle sequences just looked a bit ugly. And my last criticism is that there were a few shots that were just a little bit out of focus in places, but that's just like a nitpick. But still, for a Ridley Scott movie, you wouldn't expect a shot that's slightly out of focus to make it through the editing suite. But there's still a lot about this film which is exceptional, like the lavish costume design by Janty Yates, the production design by Arthur Max, the sound, as well as the score. Hans Zimmer didn't return to score this film, but there are echoes of his music in Harry Gregson Williams' score. But yeah, he has also created a lot of new music for this film as well, and it's done really well. Alrighty, do I think that Gladiator 2 will have any Oscars chances? Yes, I do. I think critics and audiences are mostly going to like this movie, and I think this film is going to make a lot of money, and I think it will be in our lineup for Best Picture next year. Mostly because Gladiator 2 is such a dad film. Odds are this will be most people's dad's favorite film of 2024, or at least in the top 3, because it's an epic historical swords and sandals movie, okay? The type we don't get very often. And it's very fun to watch, okay? There's a lot of action in this, a lot of violence, there's a lot of different types of violence, okay? One hand-to-hand combat, sword fights, big battle sequences. And with the Academy, with the majority of their members being older white gentlemen, this feels like the type of film that they will gravitate towards. Like Ford v Ferrari, 1917, Trial of Chicago 7, Top Gun Maverick, or Oppenheimer, this feels like the dad Best Picture entry of the year. I can't see it winning, okay? It's not like in the same leagues as Godfather Part 2, but I can see a nomination. I do think that Ridley Scott could end up in Best Director, but I don't think he's a lock just yet. But the lineup for Best Director this year is seriously lacking in the established names department. As of right now, it's kind of looking like it's going to be comprised mostly of first-time nominees, which is great. Let's get some fresh blood in. But I could see an outcome where Ridley Scott is like the token veteran pick. Ridley Scott hasn't had a directing nomination since 2002 for Black Hawk Down. And considering his last Gladiator movie went all the way and won Best Picture and he didn't win Best Director, they may be thinking subconsciously, okay, maybe it's time that we acknowledge Ridley Scott once more. He's been nominated 3 times previously for directing, for Black Hawk Down, Gladiator, and Thelma and Louise. And he's been nominated once for producing The Martian. That was back in 2016. That was his last Oscar nomination. As for performances, Denzel Washington not only seems like a surefire call for Best Supporting Actor, but he does have the goods to go all the way and potentially win it. Okay, this is really one of those supporting performances in a film that eclipses everybody else. He steals this film. Denzel Washington could very well be coming for his 3rd Oscar, and if he does go all the way and win, he would be the first black man in history, or black person I should say, to win 3 Academy Awards for acting. I don't think any of the other performances will be nominated, but I do think that Connie Nielsen will be in the discussion for Best Supporting Actress. But I'm not expecting her to get nominated again for playing the same role. Don't get me wrong, she's really good in this film, and if she did show up, I wouldn't be upset about it. It's just, after rewatching the first film a few nights ago to prepare for this one, you just see how much more she had to work with in that film as compared to this one. But maybe it's a case of, she did a lot with very little, so never say never. In terms of the techs and crafts, yes to costume design, yes to production design, yes to sound as well. And even though some of the visual effects are more convincing than others in this film, I could still see it showing up in Best Visual Effects. I personally don't think it's in contention for Best Adapted Screenplay, or Cinematography, or Editing. But what do you guys think? How many Oscar nominations is Gladiator 2 going to get? And in what categories? We have to say, let me know in that comment section down below. Also, if you haven't done so already and want to help me reach my end of year goal of 10,000 subscribers, go ahead and click that little sub button for me. Do your good deed for the day. Much appreciated if you do. But anyways, shall we ask those 3 questions? Firstly, would I watch this again? I think it's pretty obvious, isn't it? Okay, yes, I would absolutely watch this movie again. I had a great time watching it. I'm tempted to go back and watch it again in the cinema because that is where it's best experience, okay? The action in this movie really does like leap off the screen. And yeah, I will definitely be adding this movie to my collection at some point. So yeah, I'll be watching it again. Question 2, do I recommend it for you guys? Yeah, this movie is a total blast. Like I said, it's very rare for us these days to see these big budget, swords and sandal type action movies. So yeah, it is worth watching. Go watch it in a cinema, watch it with a crowd. I think most people will really enjoy it. If you like the first film, then this is more of the same, only bigger. Not necessarily better, but certainly entertaining. If you like films and TV shows like Game of Thrones, The Hunger Games Catching Fire, or, exciting legacy sequels like Top Gun Maverick, then yeah, you're bound to have a good time with this. So yeah, this film gets a big old thumbs up from me. I do recommend it. And question number 3, what score to give it out of 10? Again, Gladiator 2 isn't a superior sequel, but it is one of the stronger legacy sequels out there. It genuinely did surprise me how much I enjoyed watching this movie, so I'm gonna give Gladiator 2 a score of 7.5 out of 10. But as always, guys, it is just one bloke's opinion. I would love to hear from you. Are you excited for Gladiator 2? Have you seen it? If you have, what do you make of this movie? What do you have to say? Let me know in that comment section down below. If you've enjoyed the video, help me out by hitting that little thumbs up button, or thumbs down if you didn't like it. If you want more movie, TV, and Oscars related content, don't forget to click subscribe. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. For more things related to movies, TV, the Oscars, and popcorn culture, I'm Luke Hearfield, and I'll see you next time.